I continue to practice this, the practice, the series, the primary series every day religiously. It was my religion. I was very, very attached to it. I would say that I was addicted to it. I had to practice. If I did not practice for at least 2 hours, I was happier if I had 3, 6 days a week. I believed that I wouldn't feel as good as I felt. So I had to keep practicing because I thought I'd fall apart without it. With that level of practice, and that's all I did, right? So I wasn't going to the gym or doing other forms of fitness at that point. At that time, I was just doing primary series. Well, what happened to me is typically what happens to most people who do just that for a very long time. One of the first things that goes is the knees with that particular practice. So my knees started to hurt. I ignored it. Ashtanga teachers around me were telling me that you have to break your knees to be able to get into those poses. Those words were used by the most fanatic teachers from New York who I had up here. When I told them I was starting to have knee problems, they said, "Oh, that's normal." Oh, okay, so I shouldn't worry. No, don't worry about it. That's part of the change that has to take place. Your knees are changing. You have to go through this in order to be able to do those postures. I believed them. I wanted to believe them. After about 1.5 years of pain, like it grew and grew, it started waking me up in the middle of the night, aching, deep pain. I thought, okay, time to go to the doctor. The doctor did an ultrasound. This test showed I had a cyst inside my knee from friction. She said, probably the yoga. Why don't you just stop doing those postures? I said, good idea. Okay. Great. My livelihood depended on it. My studio was based on it. Every single class I taught was that. And that was huge jolt. It was like, boom, boom, jolt. Like I couldn't sit like this. I could only go this far for about 1.5 years after I would stop doing the poses. Eventually, it's all better now. But I began to ask people what I should do. Like all the teachers who were older than me at the time, what should I do? Does this happen to you? What have you heard? And the general consensus was that I should be doing hip openers. So I did. That's what they tell you. When your knees hurt, it's because your hips are too tight. So you got to do more hip openers. Okay, it made sense. So pigeon, box pigeon, legs behind the head, like Baddha Konasana, Padmasana, all of those poses, long holds, really working on the hip openers. And the knee pain all went away. So that was wonderful. And my hips became very, very flexible and very, very open. And one day I was sitting at Downward Dog up on the stairs where I used to have the singing bowls, and I was playing the singing bowls. It was a Sunday morning. I went in early to play the bowls and meditate before the class came in. And I was sitting like this. I was sitting like this. I was reversing. I sat for about an hour in those 2 or 3 positions. And I actually said to myself, wow, your hips are open. It doesn't even hurt, because it used to hurt me a lot to sit like this. My knees were up here, my legs would go numb, like it used to be a big problem. So there I was sitting now, all the hip openers worked. I could sit for an extended period of time, very still, very comfortable, with no feeling of discomfort anywhere. I went to get up, and I stood up. I'll show you, I was doing this. This was now like 10 minutes after sitting. I went to do this, and I heard pop, 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 pop in my hip. Tendons tearing off the bone. I don't know if you've ever heard that popping sound. I'd never heard it before, but it was loud and it was brutal. I fell to the floor. I was starting a class. I sat like this. I played the bowl. I counted. I was really into counting those days, just like doing the series, not mixing it up, calling the pose, and counting from 1 to 5. I didn't have to demonstrate. Nobody knew. At the end of the class, everybody leaves, and last person's in the room watching me do this. Helps me up. I hop in a cab, I go home. I get diagnosed by a sports medicine doctor. And the diagnosis was I tore my muscles off the bone. The question he kept asking me was, what were you doing when it happened? And I said, I wasn't. He thought I was being assisted. He thought I was going into an extreme posture. Like he was looking for the reason why that could happen to me. And I said, I was doing, like I didn't even go into the posture. Like that's nothing. I was just moving. And it's like, and then he said, what were you doing before it happened? And I realized as soon as he said that, I got it. I had been sitting in postures without moving for an hour. And I just saw him recently, actually, and I told him the story that, I tell this story all the time. In the teacher training programs I do, I always tell my students this story as a lesson on what I did wrong. So the analogy he gave me was, if you take a piece of meat and you hang it from a hook, the numbers I'm going to get wrong, maybe you can, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. You hang a piece of meat from a hook, after 10 minutes, it's going to hang down another 20%. After another 10 minutes, it's going to hang down another 30%, et cetera, until finally, all it takes is one little boing, and it falls. It rips right off because it's gradually becoming weaker and weaker and weaker because of the forces of gravity and the weight of the meat. So he said, Diane, you overstretched your muscles so much that there was nothing holding them on the bone. Wow, what a shock that was for me. That was a shock. The rehab process was incredibly painful because I had to process a lot of, I had to question so much. When I started to rehab, I realized that my gluteal muscles were completely dysfunctional. The bad side that I ripped, of course, is dysfunctional. The good side was dysfunctional. I couldn't engage. I was having like this little private thing with a friend of mine who just took a Pilates course, and she was showing me some glute strengthening exercises, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't engage. Whoa, what the heck? Then I realized that I had been training myself to disengage my glutes. Everything I had heard from every single yoga teacher was relax your glutes, soften your glutes, relax your glutes, soften your glutes. Bridge pose, back bends, everything, relax your glutes, relax your glutes. I did. When I started doing Ashtanga, I didn't. I used them. And I was constantly being told to relax them. I eventually learned to relax them. What happens when your glutes become dysfunctional is your hip flexors begin to overwork. And that's a common pattern and something that's happening a lot right now for a lot of people. It's a big problem. And but it took me years to process this information. You have to understand. I was extremely insecure about it. I was afraid to talk about it. When I did finally, after a couple of years, I knew that I was right because I had strengthened my glutes again. I'd done all these rehab exercises, so now they were functional again. And I felt so much better that I realized that, what I had been doing was completely imbalanced. We're told to strengthen and engage every single muscle in our body, depending on what pose we're doing. So every single muscle gets this attention and this intention to activate, energize, engage. And all the glutes ever heard was to soften. I realized it was completely wrong and didn't make any sense. And I've talked to umpteen physiotherapists, chiropractors, doctors, people who have been injured have gone to their chiropractors, doctors, physios. Everyone comes back to me and reports to me because in the first few years they thought I was crazy. And as time went on, people started realizing, whoa, maybe she was onto something. And so people were sharing their experiences with me. The yoga community was not very interested in this revelation that I had had. My immediate community was not interested. They thought I was a little wacky. I started doing like this shaking stuff and these undulations, and it was making people really nervous. It's true. It was. So they put it to, well, it's that kind of fringe yoga, that movement thing that she's into. It's like, that doesn't have anything to do with yoga. Another huge revelation I had was, here's Catherine. Ido Portal is this incredible trainer, personal trainer. He's more than a personal trainer. I went to a workshop that she was attending, and I just went to pick her up, and I could see he had 20 people in handstand with their feet against the wall. And I was standing there, and he yelled out, "Engage your glutes!" Really loud. He's a really powerful guy. "Squeeze your butt!" The whole line, like their feet came off the wall and like people started balancing handstand. It was crazy. And I went, aha, see? There's another example. I was looking for all these signs from the world to like help me, like, and me and Ido, we ended up having a talk, and he also had heard that in yoga everybody's relaxing their glutes. He goes, that's crazy. That's crazy. That's nuts. So, yeah, that's my story. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to move on and begin to recreate a new space and a new way for me to teach and a new way for people who are interested to practice. I've developed a class called Yoga Rebound. We do some bouncing on the ball. And one of the most important benefits there's two. One is, it's the best glute strengthening exercise I've ever found, ever. And I've been focused on that for the past 5-6 years. So bouncing on the ball, it's incredibly strengthening, and it builds this resiliency in your pelvis. Talk about Mula Bandha. You will be doing Mula Bandha like never before. It's incredible. And the other thing it's wonderful for is circulation. So since I had surgery and I have a big scar and lymph issues, it's wonderful for circulation. So it's helping me to stay really healthy. And I'm really excited about starting to teach yoga again, wearing the body braid. Body braid are those black bands over there. We wore them in the class before. It's a brand new invention invented by a friend of mine. And it's just really, really new. And the intention is for me to begin to teach yoga again, wearing the body braid. Because it has this effect of containing, pulling all your joints together, keeping all your tissues extremely resilient and elastic. It doesn't let you stretch as far, and it makes you work harder. I love it. Because one of the biggest issues I see in the yoga world right now is people are overstretching. So the body braid, you can't overstretch wearing it. You actually have to work harder to not go as far. It's really a fascinating, we're not quite sure what to call it. It's like a gift. It's a gift. People put it on and they say it's like a teacher. Because as soon as you put it on, it just stands you up straight. It puts you into the most perfect Tadasana or Samastitihi. And then from there, you just build your postures from there, and it's an incredible teaching tool.